Hopefully came out. Got to you saying, you can sit there.
Alright, sorry about that. I completely forgot about, like, stuff. So, firstly, apologies for not being here last week. Did everyone get a chance to watch the lectures from last year? No? Fantastic. Jen is nodding. Yeah, good, well done for you. Maddie's all over it. I'm pleased for it. The reason why that lecture is important is because it's a very pertinent topic for the second assignment, basically. So, the slides in particular, like many of the slides for the module, are lift and drop. You can just pick up the material out of the slides, drop it into your essay. It's already pre-referenced for you. Knock yourself out. You can't be done for plagiarism if you reference it properly. So that material is already there. Similarly, the stuff from this week. What I anticipated this last year, and I think is probably going to be the case this year as well. People want to do or to talk about games in assignment 2 which are controversial or have had some kind of buzz around them which indicates that there is some kind of controversy attached to them, because it is easier to string out 2,500 words about something which is controversial because you have lots to talk about it. I have no problem with that. I am fully prepared to read another 10 essays about Grand Theft Auto 5. I have no problem with that whatsoever, because I like Grand Theft Auto 5, so I'm happy with it. Or some other sort of blood fest which goes on. The caveat being, I don't think anyone did Grand Theft Auto 5 for the first video, so you can't do the same game for the essay as you did for the video.
I was thinking of GTA 4.
Which I would be delighted with, because I actually think it's a better game than GTA 5 as well. But, well, at least it's got a more compelling protagonist, I would argue anyway. That essay is ripe for critical, that game is ripe for critical reflection, even solely on the basis of who they've chosen that main character to be, and how they give context to wars in the 1990s in Yugoslavia, etc. It's a really interesting delve into how characterization and how people consider migrants, which is, I think, is fascinating anyway. So, gender issues in games are always very important when you do a critical analysis. This issue is equally as important, the idea of violence in video games. Most people are tended towards picking games which have some controversial content, which usually includes some element of violence. It is probably good to cover this debate. If I had been teaching you in MS 100, which I wasn't because I was in a hospital bed in Morriston Hospital at the time, but if I had been doing that, I would have shown you this video. But I wasn't teaching you, so you haven't seen this video. So, let's watch this video. I like this video. This video is one of my favorites.
Great.
Did you know that 9 out of 10 kids play video games?
I'm on it! Yeah, go! I'm fine! What's so game with you? What's so game with you? What's so game with you? What's so game with you?
But did you also know that video games cause violence?
No! That's silly!
It's time to play. For real.
Stop your children from playing video games today.
Now that's a pro gamer move.
Before it's too late.
Now, that is one of my favourite videos ever, to be honest. It's not very subtle. What is it trying to say?
Video games cause violent behaviour, antisocial behaviour.
Well, is it actually telling us that?
I don't know what Yeah.
I think what we can, certainly it's identifying that that is an argument that is made. What I think the video does in a really over-the-top way is illustrate that that might not be the case. You know, that actually kids in the 90s did not lose at Tetris and then decide to batter the other person with a brick and then piss all over them. This was an unlikely scenario, and it's pretty funny because of it. As a show of hands, how many of you have played what you would consider to be a violent video game? Wonderful, all of you. As another show of hands, how many of you have been arrested and charged with a violent offence against another person? Just Alice, which is not surprising if we know Alice, right? I have been playing violent video games as they have been classed since I was like, what, 8? To this date, 35, 36 years later, I have not yet been charged with violence against another person. That doesn't mean I haven't committed any violence against another person, but that's a different issue altogether. And I don't think those violent incidents were influenced by video games, quite frankly. They were influenced more by the general sort of twattishness of human beings in the 21st century. This debate still, for some unbeknownst reason, still exists. The idea that games should be, the games that have violent content will have a detrimental effect on players and will influence players to act violently is still an active debate. This has been going on since the 1970s. In reality, this argument that, you know, playing violent video games will result in violent behaviour really coincides with the emergence of video games as a medium in the 1970s. It has reached peaks over the years. First peak being in the early 90s, with the emergence of one game in particular. Any ideas what that game was? Funnily enough, it's been rebooted this year, weirdly.
I think I have an idea. What the name of the game? Is it the one where you can piss on people as well, like that? Am I thinking the wrong one? What? I'm thinking.
You can do worse things than that.
I'm trying to think what the game's called.
The big one in the early 90s was Mortal Kombat.
Oh.
Fighting-based game, you know, a classic two-person fighting game where, should you win, you were allowed to execute certain finishing moves, including like ripping people's spines out and so on. No, again, I don't remember in any news coverage in the 90s of some kid who had played Mortal Kombat tearing another person's spine out. In fact, I think that would be really difficult to do. You know, I'm not an expert on anatomy, but I think tearing someone's spinal cord out is actually, you've got to have, you've got to be special to do that, right? So that was the first peak. Then, peaks afterwards have coincided with particular news stories. Now, his defense used video game addiction as mitigation for his crime, and in doing so, pulled up the developers of Halo 3 as not defense witnesses, but as people that they were questioning in order to show that it was their fault that this happened. That they had made the game too addictive, and then when his addiction was broken, this was the inevitable consequence of playing this game. So you had the developers of Halo up on the stand, basically defending themselves from causing this kid to do this. It is so absurd that it kind of defies belief, right? But this is another one, again, the whole Halo 3 thing came through the media. You know, this is what they found out about this kid, this is how they reported it. We got a British one.
Manhunter.
Yeah. Warren LeBlanc. This is in 2004 in Leicester. Stabbed his best friend with a claw hammer. Do you all know what I'm referring to? You know, the traditional hammer's got a head to it and then a part on the end, which is a claw.
Yeah.
That's a claw hammer.
Oh.
So he turned the head around and used the claw bit to stab his friend with in a park in Leicester. That method of killing somebody is one which is in the game Manhunt, and is part of a mission which you are supposed to do in Manhunt to progress the game. You use a claw hammer to kill someone. And again, in particular, the Daily Mail went absolutely insane about this, and was like, ban this game, ban this sick filth, he's copied the game. What they completely left out of the media coverage of that is that he didn't own a copy of the game. His friend had a copy of the game, but there was no evidence that he'd actually played the game either. So the only person in this who owned a copy of the game was the kid who was stabbed, not the perpetrator. There was absolutely no evidence at all that the perpetrator had even played the game. But it ended up as being all over the thing, and Rockstar Games had to come out again and say, we're sorry about something which they had nothing to do with. They literally had zero to do with this at all.
But if you owned the game, would it change things, in your opinion?
Not really. I mean, this is a young person who had significant psychological problems. His home life was a wreck. It was evidential that he had very, very disorderly attachments to other people, hardly ever went to school, had long history of violence towards other children, school going back into primary school. So the signs were there that something bad like this could happen. It was the manner in which it happened which became the big thing, rather than the fact that he's actually he stabbed someone and you knew this was coming. If you looked at his history as an individual, you knew this was going to happen. The judge actually threw out any association with the video game, and the police did as well. When they did the investigation, said no, there's no evidence to suggest this was the case. The police went looking for why he did it, and they instantly threw that out. But the media did not. It still kept on being reported as the manhunt killer afterwards. So, why would the media do that? Why would the British media concentrate on the discredited idea that this kid had played this game? What does it do?
It reinforces pre-existing ideologies.
Fantastic. It reinforces the idea that video games are responsible for this kind of behaviour, 1. 2, it provides a very simple narrative as to why these kind of things happen. And, as many of you in this room will do journalism degree, right? You will know that one of the roles of tabloid journalism in particular is to simplify issues to make them easier to understand for their readership. What could be easier than A plus B equals C? Playing Manhunt plus stabbing somebody with a claw hammer equals Manhunt is responsible for that action. It provides a very, very easy narrative in order to understand things. So it does a dual role, and it maintains this idea. And that can be a very useful sort of shortcut to deploy whenever you see, in particular, extreme violence with children. You instantly go looking at what video games they play. Instantly go to that point. Well, Henry Jenkins, I love Henry so much. I always talk about Henry Jenkins, even though I think he's a dick. But Henry Jenkins, this is one of the things that I like. He gives this argument about context. Has there ever been a video game where you go and kill people in a school? What do you think the reaction would be if there was?
Maybe GTA 6 will do it now.
Well, I kind of hope they do. I kind of hope they embrace this and say, like, Mission 43, go into a high school and kill a load of kids,
Weirdly in games, killing children has been a taboo, but it used to be a common thing in early video games. Like,
It used to be really common.
Like in the old Fallout games, you could just blow up children, no consequence to it.
And there's a huge thing, there's a lot of content on TikTok of this, right? Red Dead Redemption 2 in particular, with that kid.
Is it Jackmaster?
Yeah, where like people like throw dynamite at him and stuff like that, he explodes everywhere.
It's funny,
people do kill kids in games, it does happen.
Yeah, you have to mod the game, but it's true, like in Skyrim, one of the most popular mods for Skyrim is the ability to just kill children.
Yeah.
Because they're annoying. So you just
I mean, I hate children as much as the next person, right? And nothing would please me more than to kill lots of them. But contextually, I don't go out and do it. That's mostly influenced by the fact that I have to walk down Sketty every morning to work. And I get stuck in fucking Tesco behind loads of kids who go to Bishop Gore School. I would like nothing more than run through Bishop Gore School with a semi-automatic weapon, killing loads of them. It would make my walk to work easier. It's pragmatic, is what I'm saying. It's not because I'm an evil person. It's making everyone's life easier.
Sounds like a psychopath to me.
Well, I think I could argue there's faults on both sides. So no jury of the land's going to convict me.
Well, sorry. Could you argue the reason you don't really see as many kids getting killed in video games anymore for RPGs is because of real world effects, possibly?
Yeah, well, you are right. Yeah. Look.
I don't say they cause effect, but because of what's happening, they don't want to risk being associated with that.
Absolutely, and although, like, for example, Red Dead Redemption 2 allows you to do that. It's a part of the game. There are children in it. If you, as a character, you can shoot them. There's no thing about that. There's nothing in the game that stops you from doing that. I'll be honest. I believe I've never done that.
I don't think. I'm probably contradict. I don't think you can. Like I actually tried in the game.
Really?
The game won't allow you to play, like in Saint Denis with a kid, still just staff. You find kids in alleyways. You can't.
Oh, yeah.
You have to glitch the game out to try and kill them.
You run after them, don't you? But you can't catch them up.
You can't catch
Yeah,
them.
they always run fast. You can always find inventive
well.
ways to do it, though.
You
And there's
can't find
definitely a way you can do it, and certainly with GTA 4 this was a thing. You could do it with a sniper rifle.
Are the kids in GTA 4?
Not many, but there are some about in some of the areas. Yeah. And with Red Dead Redemption 2, I mean, shooting them is difficult, but you can do it, especially if you use a sniper rifle. It's like
I've seen something online.
Yeah, exactly.
But also, you can do other things with them, like you can hog tie them, and then leave them on railway tracks. That works. Or you can, like, you can hog tie them and throw them into a river, and they'll drown. So and stuff like that. So if you really want to kill kids, knock yourself out. But you've got to be inventive about it, like all great, children killers. You always got to have a bit of invention about it. What Jenkins' very simple argument that he makes is, okay, if you're talking about high school massacres, there is no game that perpetrates a high school massacre. So if you're going to use this really simple behavioural modelling argument for violence in video games, that kids will copy anything they see in games. Okay, well, they've never seen that. That's never been a thing. So there must be other mediating factors in it. It can't be as simple as, right, I saw this, therefore I am going to do that. It's even with the manhunt example, right? There's a context to how that happens in the game. It is not quite as simple as, like, you pick up a hammer and, there's a story. There is an element of narrative performance that goes on with it. That doesn't exist in, even with Doom. There's an idea of, there's a context in which Doom exists. You're the Doom guy, as unbelievably that character is known. He hasn't got a name, and you are killing all these demons in order to liberate this area from being possessed by other things. It's not a great story. I'm not saying it's Oscar-worthy, but there's a context as to why you're asked to do those things in the game. This is completely different to going into a school and shooting people up. There's a whole different context to why that happens. And you just equate the one with the other, you miss all the context of that, and you miss all the context of what happens in the game as well. You are completely decontextualizing everything that has occurred. That's a very, very dangerous thing to do, because it leads to oversimplified answers to very complex questions, and leads to really oversimplified solutions. If you want to hold this argument, violent video games are the root cause of violence in children, so let's stop them from playing it. Well, guess what happens? You're still going to get kids doing violent things. Where do you go after doing that? After saying, right, we have solved the problem, where do you go next when it happens again? Because it will happen again. Because you haven't dealt with any of the actual issues which cause people to do this in the first instance. So it's a really dangerous thing. So that's really Jenkins' argument here. By decontextualising everything and taking the context away, you completely miss how these things can actually be dealt with. And you know, the one in America, the classic one in America is, well, if you took guns out of people's hands, people wouldn't be able to go and shoot schools up. You know, that is a much more simple argument to make, but politically that's a much more difficult argument to make in America. That's an extremely difficult one. If you look at discourse in video games, in major, so this discourse analysis done and content analysis done of major news magazines in America going back into the 1980s. The discourse is plagued with misconceptions and frequently vilifies the game itself, not the player. So Williams's research over a massive longitudinal study of things like Time and Newsweek, etc. The game itself is the thing that gets scapegoated, the player does not. So in this argument, players have no agency. We simply play a game and then it makes us do things, without taking any context of, like, human beings have agency. And without actually contextualising that millions of people might play a game. Now, if one person commits a violent act, that's a tragedy. But it doesn't then account for all the millions of people who have also played the game and not done that thing. What is the reason why that is happening? Because that's obviously a much more powerful effect, because this is many millions of people. So the big thing about the Doom one is that that was the only killing ever associated with it. It's like, at one point in 1994, Doom was installed on more computers than Microsoft Windows, as an indication of how popular that game was. It's like, hang on a minute, there were a lot of people playing this game. You know, this was incredibly popular. So what about all those other people who played it? Did they go and do the same things? No, they didn't. But if you look at the discourses in it, you know, this is a really evil, evil piece of technology, right? What is also found in this content analysis is that it never mentions women as game players. It never mentions players over the age of like 16. It's that the media's coverage of video games historically has been, this is a problem because it is played by boys aged 8 to 16. That's who's being influenced by this. And it's like, well, that's not true. You know, none of us in this room would be considered in that media coverage. We all play games, right? You know, I assume we wouldn't be doing this module. So there's a mainstream media narrative which has done this. Now, it's come on. I think the mainstream media now deals with video games in a much more mature fashion. But you still see this crap come up all the time. And I guarantee it's tomorrow, right? GTA 6. The trailer drops, right? The big reveal tomorrow. I guarantee, I don't want to stipulate which newspaper this is going to be, but it'll be one of two. It'll be either the Daily Mail or the Daily Express. We'll have a story this week about GTA 6, about how it's going to be terrible for young people. I guarantee it's fucking regular as clockwork. It could be both.
Also The Guardian.
The Guardian will have a more nuanced view, because they're very middle class and lefty in The Guardian. They will say, well, there's some problematic aspects of the game, but it does look very well directed. That'll be the sort of approach The Guardian will have. And the actual video game newsletter that comes out with Guardian, pushing buttons, they'll be really effusive about it and they'll be really enthusiastic. But some dick will come along and say, well, you know, this could be a problem, but look how beautiful the ray tracing is. You know, it'll be some nonsense like that. We have a whole bunch of theories. Media effects, catharsis theory, cultivation theory, social learning theory, general arousal theory, cognitive neo-arousal theory, the general aggression model. All of these theories are here to deal with violence in video games and violent behaviour, and we shall demolish each one of them after we've had 5 minutes for a break. Thank you.